Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. Who's going to stop a brazen Boko Haram? We've been asking the question to Cameroonian journalist Julia Wono, as well to publisher and politician Deli Mamoudou, who joins us from Lagos. Also with us, Michael Olajide, Nigerian businessman and commentator, and journalist Michael Kirtley, producer of the World Memory Film Project. Remind us, what's the World Memory Film Project?
The World Memory Film Project is a worldwide effort to get young people involved in denouncing xenophobia and denouncing major atrocities against groups of people. Certainly Boko Haram would be on our list.
All right. By the way, adding insult to injury, forgive my Nigerian panelists here for reminding them of this. Nigeria didn't even qualify for the African Nations Cup. Yeah, that's... Cameroon, though, is there. The Indomitable Lions opening their campaign Tuesday in Equatorial Guinea against Mali.
We support the Lions. From the first to the last match, we'll be at the stadium. We're going to take the cup back to Cameroon with us to say to President Paul Biya that we're here supporting the Cameroonian people, whoever they are, and to say no to Boko Haram.
All right, so even the football fans bringing up Boko Haram, Julia Wono.
I was thinking of bringing up the subject of AFCON, how the AFCON will probably, erase the Boko Haram subject from the
it didn't in the minds of
African headlines, but finally not. And well, it's a good news. But what I'm most worried about is that we do not talk enough. It's important to praise the efforts of the Cameroonian army, the African armies that will be involved later on. But it's also important to talk about accountability. Who is responsible for the spread of that sect in the region? Who will tell us, okay, we have made a mistake. We have not assessed properly the situation. And until now, it's like there is a sort of omerta on that. Nobody asks questions. Nobody says anything.
Law of silence.
Yeah, and. Some Cameroonian media even pointed the finger at, foreign forces who are manipulating Boko Haram. Well, okay, that's possible. But what are our responsibilities as Cameroonians, as Nigerians, as Chadians, etc., in abandoning these people to themselves and letting them praise for these, frightening groups? I'm really personally affected because it's a tragedy once again.
So they left the North to its own devices for too long, and that made these people vulnerable to these radical groups.
Of course, these people were vulnerable until very recently. In the case of Cameroon, many media were surprised that the President Biya had not been to the north for so many years. He went there in 2013 or 12 for the first time in, I think, 20 years, because after there had been floods in the northern region and there had been cholera outbreak. But except from that, basically the president had not been much there, which is a huge sign. And it's even a bigger sign in the context of Cameroon, because historically there has always been, a sort of, well, some people say that, okay, Biya represents the South power, and the former president of Cameroon, Amadou Ahidjo, represented the Northern power, and he was taken out by the Southerners. So historically, it's already very sensitive. But contemporarily, we have abandoned these people, and it's a huge responsibility. We have to deal with that at some point. If we do not, I'm afraid that no matter how many weapons, no matter how many armies you put up there, the problem will always be the same. There would be young people who would be seduced by that speech and by that violence. Yes.
Let's not forget that what we're looking at, I think, today, and it's not just in northern Nigeria, it's also in Somalia, it's also in Iraq and Syria, we've seen it in Mali and Niger, and is kind of the rage of the dispossessed, if you wish.
And a power vacuum to a certain degree.
Yes. You have a situation where people have been left alone to their poverty, and with little effort to control a kind of organized development of these areas similar to what's going on elsewhere. And that's particularly true in northeastern Nigeria, and it's also true in northern Cameroon. And most of the time people don't react badly, they just suffer. But then now, because of a global ideology that is able to get hold, there's a possibility to control certain elements in these areas and finance them. And I think that's the major issue we're talking about here is how is Boko Haram supported? It's not just local sympathizers. That doesn't make an army. That doesn't create tanks. That doesn't bring in Kalashnikovs.
So you're saying that banditry, a bit of trafficking, some
those kinds of things were normal.
Kidnapping for ransom.
Kidnapping for ransom, no, but banditry
These things,
and those things have existed.
They don't feed the
in
beast?
the zone. They don't?
That's not enough to feed the beast, you're saying?
I don't think so. Of course not. I think that if Boko Haram were not being supported, as we know that they have been by Al-Qaeda, if they weren't being supported by certain other elements in the Middle East, if they weren't being supported by certain elements in Nigeria, and let's not forget that there are certain wealthy people in Nigeria who are supporters of Boko Haram, then Boko Haram couldn't bring itself, it couldn't have the kind of strength that it does, and it would be a lot easier to combat. But I think that we can't be blind to the fact that Boko Haram is not just as they say in French, an epiphenomenon. They don't just exist in a vacuum there. Okay, they created themselves. They started in the early 1990s, and then they became more official in the early 2000s. But this is a situation that's been around for a long time and goes hand in hand with the influx of Wahhabism into that area.
All right, and Julia Wono is saying that guns alone won't solve the problem.
Well, I certainly agree. The first thing to do is financial containment. If they don't have money, then they can't really operate very well. Number one, but guns. I mean, who's going to bring the guns? Nigeria doesn't seem willing to bring the guns. Now, you mentioned earlier about the World Memory Film Project. We work with the United Nations, and I'm wondering. In 1994, after the Rwandan genocide, there was this big effort to say we have the responsibility to protect. There was a huge document called the Responsibility to Protect. Well, if there's a population that needs protecting in the world right now, it certainly is the people of northeastern Nigeria.
Adeli Mahmoudou,
Yes.
on that issue, the guns won't do it, say our panelists here in the studio.
Yeah, I think one of the areas I always like to talk about is the fact that we still need to convince the Nigerian government that this is not a politically motivated thing, that terrorism is terrorism wherever in the world. Until the government wakes up from that living in denial, saying and telling the people that some people want to make the country ungovernable for the government of the day, we're not going to make much progress. So the government needs to cure itself of that paranoia. So a neurotic government cannot seriously tackle this issue. So
But excuse me, Dele, it's not just the government. We were talking about it less than a week ago, and we saw that neither of the candidates are broaching the question of Boko Haram much, neither of the leading candidates. And you look at the Nigerian press, and what's happening in the Northeast is not being put out there on the front page much.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You see, if the leadership is not saying much, there is little the press can do. In Nigeria, everything is still largely dependent on government, including the media. So who try to spoon-feed the media what they think they want the people to know. I mean, for the first time now, in a long time, our president went to Borno State last week. We used to think it was impossible for him to do so, but election is just a few days away, and you begin to see politicians trying to play politics with something that is very, very serious. And that's why I'm saying until the government is ready and serious about seeing it as a global phenomenon rather than a local thing, then nothing is going to happen.
All right, reaction from Scooby on Twitter. Foreign forces should support the Nigerian government in their quest to stop this terrorist cult from spreading. Michael Ajita, that visit by Goodluck Jonathan last week, it's true. It comes, what, it was the first time he'd visited Maiduguri, the capital of Borno State, since a state of emergency was declared there back in May of 2013. Nonetheless, he acknowledged the problem, which his government had not always done in the past.
Remember, we have the North, everything's happening North. Jonathan Goodluck is from the South. And I think some people in Nigeria thought this is a northern problem for northerners at the beginning. Actually, I called my brother last week. I said, hey, there are many people dying. He said, oh, it's happening 1,500 kilometers away. It's in the north. I said, hey, this is Nigeria. Well, it's the north of Nigeria. This is where we are today, where people ignore or they don't want to know what's going on elsewhere.
Is it because they're in denial, or is it because they don't care?
I think it's a denial from the government itself, where we just think this, at the beginning, there are some young boys, and we thought we'd just go away. Just close your eyes. And we think to go away. They started burning churches. They want
But they're criminals. They're killing people.
I know. And as I said, some people just think, oh, the Northerners are killing each other, you know. But now we are seeing it's a very big issue. I want to react to what this gentleman, Scooby-Doo, said. Foreign troops, yes, but African troops. Because I don't want to be politically incorrect. We know what Westerners do when they come to your country for a small period of time, and we cannot at the same time claim independence and be calling for them every 5 minutes because I have a headache. We are grown up enough. We have the arms, we have the money. It's not spent correctly, but we can't defend ourselves. We need the Westerners. We need the Westerners. Excuse me, sir. We need the Westerners for the Twitter, all this propaganda that happened. Look at what happened in France. Je suis Charlie. Bring back our girls. We made some noises, then it went down. Now 2,000 dead. Nobody. It's not the fault of the West. It's the Nigerian fault. Speak out first.
We saw some rallies taking places in cities like Paris and Montreal over the weekend in support of those who've been victims of Boko Haram. Dele Mamoudou, you were going to say.
Yeah, I was going to say that I disagree that this is a strictly African thing, that because you have independence, Nigeria had always played a major role in the United Nations. The peacekeeping forces, be it in Darfur, in Liberia, in Sierra Leone, and I think the world should come together. The moment we start saying the white, the black, we go back to the old days of prejudices, and I don't seem to agree with that. If the UN can bring Nigerian forces, and our military have always performed very well. I visited them in Sierra Leone in 2001, and everybody was happy with them. I visited them in 2008 in Liberia. Nigeria was actually controlling 10 out of the 15 counties in Liberia because they were well equipped. They were well motivated by the United Nations. If we leave it in the hands of politicians, trust me, it's going to get worse.
Julia Wono?
On the issue of Westerners intervening, because that's probably what we're implicitly talking about, I'm personally, and I think it's a thought shared by many Africans today, we think we should find an African solution first, because it is, first of all, an African problem, although at the end of the day, of course, it might have consequences also in the West, and the rallies that you've mentioned earlier prove that more and more people in the world and in the West in particular are conscious of the interconnectedness of human beings. So what happens in Baga concerns me as well. And I think
by the way, your country, Cameroon, has a bilateral defense agreement with France.
Absolutely. As many former African colonies of France, they all have defense agreements. But, okay, it's not the debate today, but we could talk about the efficiency of these agreements. But
it's, for instance, in the name of that agreement that the French intervened in Mali. And we all remember the rapturous welcome that the French president got when he went to Timbuktu.
Of course. But we should not also not mention that at the time, even after the intervention, at the time when the bilateral agreement was supposed to be resigned and renewed, there had been huge demonstrations, which proves that there are also questions asked by citizens on the efficiency, on the extent to which these interventions are profitable for African governments. So the issue of Westerners coming in, I think it's first of all important for African countries as a whole in the African Union to rethink the way we deal with our problems. It's always a pity that we have to wait to go to Paris to a summit to have Goodluck Jonathan and Paul Biya meeting together to discuss a regional problem. That's really a huge problem we have.
Because there's an extra layer in all this, which maybe our viewers who don't know Africa
Yes,
very well need to know, which
course.
is there was a border war at one point between Nigeria and Cameroon.
Exactly, and I think that's even why.
And is that still in people's minds?
Of course, even Paul Biya mentioned it in the recent.
It was what, 2 decades ago?
No, the dispute was solved in 2002, I think. Yes, and until
a long time ago.
Yeah, some time ago. But it's still in the minds. Even President Biya mentioned that problem in the recent address to the nation. He said, although we had problems with Nigerian brothers, we need to find a solution. So yes, there is. I think that's what explains why these neighbors did not find it easy to get along, because they did not go beyond ego issues.
Michael Ajide is accepting the help of Cameroon to stamp out Boko Haram on par with the humiliation of not qualifying for the African nations.
That's a good one. Yeah, I mean, this Boko Haram, we should forget our quarrels of the past. We should come together.
Will Nigeria's political class swallow its pride and accept the help from neighbors in that respect?
I think they have no choice now. We have proved that we cannot solve it ourselves.
But we heard Ghana's president there in part one of our discussion saying, look, we're waiting for that green light, and it hasn't happened yet.
I think, as Dele said, I think because of the election, they were just neglecting some stuff. But we know we need other people. We need people to help us.
I'd like to believe that it's just because of the elections. I think that the reason is more like what your brother said. They're in the north. I think the rest of Africa can only do what Nigeria is willing to do.
Sure.
Unless the rest of Africa decides that there's a huge atrocity going on, and I don't think they've decided that yet. I think that the outside world looks at Boko Haram, and I'm talking about outside Africa. We look at Boko Haram and say two things, and that's not me, but the general reaction is, A, this is horrible, B, this is African. And the B that is African is generally a negative thing. And it says, oh, the Africans, it's Africa again, okay? And this is a huge issue, because that's why people don't respond, I think, part of the reason, that like they responded to the Charlie Hebdo attack. I think there's a story, there's a narrative that exists in many people's minds outside of Africa that this is just the way Africa always is. But my problem is not that. That's not going to change overnight. My problem is that also exists in Africa in a certain way. In other words, I think that what's going on in Nigeria, when it's seen by Cameroon, is, oh, we hope it doesn't come to Cameroon. Okay? It's not, we should do something about that. Okay? It's more, Nigeria will take care of it at some point, hopefully, by the grace of God. And I'm not trying to be facetious. I think that this is a very important issue, is how do you think about atrocity when it's taking place in a country nearby, and when you see that country itself showing apathy towards that atrocity?
Dele Mamadou?
I think there are several contradictions that we need to address. The first is the big ego of my country, the biggest African yes, we don't want people to intervene on our behalf. But practically speaking, I want to assure you that I don't even think Nigeria can afford it right now. The president went to the National Assembly not too long ago to request for an extra budget of $1 billion to procure ammunition. I don't know what has become of it. But what that tells you is that if the Nigerian government is taking a loan just to buy some weapons, then it means that we may not be able to afford some other logistics that are necessary to tackle this problem. And I would say that at the end of the day, we have to treat it as a global thing. If we have to go all the way to New York, to the United Nations, you cannot say a man who is carrying you stink. That's a proverb in my language. Even if the man is thinking, you just have to accept him. When you are down, you are down. That's just the reality of the situation right now.
Julia Wono, I want to get back to this mobilization that we're starting to see. Your organization is called Internet Without Borders. Do you get a sense, to answer Mike, who was talking about this a minute ago, that Nigeria is back on people's radars now?
Yes, we do have in our metrics. Of course, when you count on the Twitter trending topics and hashtags, of course it appears that at some point Baga was in the minds of many people, and where
that slaughter took place on January 3rd.
Yeah, exactly, and that's very important. Now we have to maintain the attention, because we remember Bring Back Our Girls. We talked about it earlier. What has been done since then? Well, pretty much nothing, unfortunately, since the girls are still missing. So we have to maintain the pressure as citizens if we can, and I think we do have levels. I mean, we can maintain that pressure by talking about it, by having the media talking about it as well, and I think that's a very important responsibility for France 24, who has always been, I have to be honest, talking about these issues, and
as we are doing now.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's Nigeria and Cameroon and Chad. I mean, all the countries that are dealing with terrorism at the moment must be in the minds of all the humanity, because at the end of the day, we are all affected by this.
From near and far, Julia Wono, I want to thank you. I want to thank Michael Olajide. I want to thank Dele Momodu for being with us from Lagos. Michael Kirtley, stay with us. It's our Media Watch segment. Let's say hello to James Creedon.
Evening, Francois. So just a quick look at some of the topics that are buzzing on French and international media and social media this evening. First of all, François Hollande's massive popularity boost, according to an IFOP poll. He's gone up 21% to what is still a relatively low popularity rating of 40% in the poll. So he's benefited significantly from the way he managed the shooting at Charlie Hebdo just over a week ago and the fallout of that. So the Huffington Post has been looking at the history of boosts to presidential popularity after big events such as wars or attacks of this nature. François Mitterrand in 1991 went up 19 points in the polls, this as the Gulf War began. So that obviously had an impact as well on how he was perceived at home. Paris Match, for their part, have been looking at how specifically after attacks, terrorist attacks, the diverse fortunes of politicians, just to name one, and it's the obvious one, George W. Bush after 9/11. When 2,996 people died, he went up from, he had won the election at just 51%, as we'll remember from the time, and he went up.
Some say he didn't win it.
Well, there you go. But he went up to. Right. Let's not go there. This could take time. But he went up to 86% after the 9/11 attacks, and then up to indeed 90% approval rating at one point. So certainly, I suppose, a time when people do rally behind their leaders. Now, speaking of staying in the US, I suppose there's been a huge amount of discussion in the last week about Fox News and how they have dealt with this. A commentator on their channel spoke about no-go zones in Paris, also UK cities such as Birmingham being totally Muslim. So a few factual errors in there, and it's been widely ridiculed, not least of all by the satirical show Le Petit Journal in France, which went into these forbidden no-go zones. And you can see screen grabs here. This is in the absolutely forbidden Belleville neighbourhood, Francois, and there you have one individual walking around, in that very dangerous environment. So a lot of people
James is being facetious.
I'm being very facetious. Let me just clarify that.
Eating the best neighbourhoods to eat and
absolutely. Speaking of, ParisByMouth.com, eating and drinking in no-go zones. They've put together a guide, Francois, of all the different eateries and craft beer bars and things like that.
Amazing Chinese food.
Amazing Chinese food. But modern French. You want a bit of modern French? Maybe Italian burgers, Kurdish sandwiches. It's all in there. ParisByMouth.com. So perhaps it kind of takes the worrying edge off things. So there you go. Fox News has apologised for getting it slightly wrong in that regard.
All right, food for thought, courtesy of James Creighton. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Thank you.